Good evening, everyone. I request all the participants to mute your mic and turn off your videos to let smoothly run this lecture. I would also request all the participants to kindly write their questions in the chat box. We will have a question answer session at the end of this lecture. As already introduced in our first lecture series about the objectives of the Holkar Cultural Center, I would like to say a few words about it for all who have missed our first lecture. The Holkar Cultural Center in Maheshwar is an initiative by the Royal Holkar family to research, document, and create a vibrant dialogue around 300 years of Holkar history and Maratha culture. The Holkar Cultural Center has two areas of focus, broadly defined as cultural heritage, covering Holkar history, culture, and traditions, and built heritage, which covers the extensive portfolio of beautiful and historic structures built and restored by the Holkars, most notably Devi Ahilyabai Holkar. This lecture is about the built heritage, which will focus on the restoration work undertaken by the royal family in Maheshwar. Now, I would like to request Yuvraj Yashwantrao Holkar to introduce our small movie world premiere on living legacy of Ahilyabai Holkar.
Thank you so much, Supriya, and thank you for everybody who's joined us this afternoon. We had a small surprise for you, which is something that I'm delighted to share with you all, which is the very first showing of the Holkar Cultural Center's inaugural short film called Living Legacy. The HCC, as we call the Holkar Cultural Center, an important part of our mission is to make sure that Devi Ahilyabai legacy is known to the world as we see it today in Maheshwar as well. And this short film highlights her great legacy and how it is still very much alive in Maheshwar today. It is very much in her honor and in tribute to her that the Holkar Cultural Center, the Ahilya Fort Heritage Hotel, Reva Society, Women Weave, the Ahilya School, and everything that we do in Maheshwar. It is in her honor and with her guidance and blessings that we work to keep Maheshwar's beautiful history and culture alive and flourishing. And it's just on a personal level, it is so wonderful to see many of the people on today's call who have been great devotees of Maheshwar and given so much of their time without expectation, in just great service to this wonderful place and wonderful woman. And of course, Ravi has been a dear friend and long time Maheshwar Bhakt, as we say. And we'll hear from him on his journey. But I would like to also thank Nalini Thakurji, who was one of the very first people who came to Maheshwar with Ravi and started to document these beautiful temples, chhatris, ghats, and the fort. And there are many others who are with us today. So a special thank you to you all for being part of this effort and journey. A special thanks also goes to the talented young cinematographer team from Indore, Cornerstone Productions, young, all in there, I must be under 25, who created this wonderful film. And a special thanks to the HCC's own team, Sandeep, Dahisarkar, and Supriya ji, for guiding that film team, as well as to the dedicated team at the Ahilya Fort Heritage Hotel and Labus for all the help and support that they extended in the creation of this film. We felt that today's lecture, given by our dear friend Ravi, who is a great devotee of Masad and Maheshwar, was the perfect opportunity to premiere this film. And so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the world premiere of Living Legacy.
महेश्वर भारत के दिल कहे जाने वाले मध्य प्रदेश के खरगोन तहसील में नर्मदा नदी के तट पर बसा एक नगर। महेश्वर यूं तो कई कारणों से विश्व प्रसिद्ध है, जैसे उसका भव्य किला, कई मनमोहक मंदिर, अपनी विशेष हथकरघा एवं हस्तशिल्प कला और नौका विहार तथा पर्यटन आदि जैसी कई गतिविधियां। किंतु इन सबसे पहले महेश्वर का नाम सुनते ही जो एक नाम तुरंत याद आता है वह है देवी अहिल्याबाई होलकर। उनके सम्मान में उनकी विरासत महेश्वर में आज भी उनकी तथा उनके कार्यों की छवि जीवित है। यह विश्व प्रसिद्ध है कि वह एक महान शिव भक्त थी। उनका यही समर्पण तथा प्रेम अपनी प्रजा के प्रति किए गए कार्यों में भी स्पष्ट रूप से दिखता है। उन्होंने यहाँ न केवल महेश्वर के किले का निर्माण करवाया, बल्कि कई मंदिर तथा घाट इत्यादि भी बनवाए। यह सब उन्होंने अपनी प्रजा को सुरक्षा, समृद्धि तथा शांति प्रदान करने के लिए किया। लिंगार्चन पूजा। यह पूजा हर समुदाय, उनके प्रतिनिधियों तथा प्रमुख लोगों के लिए एक सीख है। सभी का प्राथमिक कर्तव्य है कि वह जन कल्याण के प्रयास करे। इस पूजा के दौरान भगवान शिव के सैकड़ों पार्थिव शिवलिंग बनाए जाते हैं। इनका विशेष विधि विधान के साथ अभिषेक तथा पूजन होता है तथा अंततः इन्हें पुनः माता नर्मदा में विसर्जित कर दिया जाता है। अहिल्याबाई भगवान शिव के साथ साथ मां नर्मदा की भी उपासक थी। उन्होंने न केवल नर्मदा के जल को शुद्ध रखने का संदेश दिया, बल्कि इसके साथ साथ मछलियों को दाना डालने अर्थात खाना खिलाने की परंपरा भी आरंभ की। देवी अहिल्याबाई यह अच्छी तरह से जानती थी कि अपनी प्रजा को आजीविका का स्रोत प्रदान करना एक राजा का प्रथम कर्तव्य होता है। इसका प्रबंधन करने के लिए उन्होंने अपनी हस्तकला एवं हथकरघा कला की समझ और रुचि का प्रयोग किया। 1971 में जब होलकर परिवार वापस महेश्वर आया तो बुनकरों की गंभीर हालत देखकर उन्हें मां अहिल्याबाई के नक्शे कदमों पर चलते हुए महेश्वर के लोगों के लिए कुछ करने की प्रेरणा प्राप्त हुई। महेश्वर की हथकरघा कला को पुनर्जीवित करने के लिए उन्होंने रेवा सोसाइटी की स्थापना की, जिससे महेश्वर के लोगों को पुनः आजीविका का वही स्रोत प्राप्त हो सके। लगभग 50 साल बाद आज महेश्वर सिर्फ भारत ही नहीं बल्कि पूरे विश्व में अपनी हथकरघा कला के लिए सुप्रसिद्ध है। होलकर परिवार ने महेश्वर के किले को और अधिक मजबूती प्रदान की, जिसे आज पुनः अपने प्रारंभिक सौंदर्य की अवस्था के समकक्ष ले जाने के लिए नवीनीकरण किया जा रहा है, जिससे इनकी सुंदरता और भव्यता का आनंद आने वाली पीढ़ियां भी पूर्ण रूप से ले सकें। मां अहिल्याबाई की स्मृति और छवि आज भी जीवित है, जिसका एक उदाहरण है हर सोमवार को निकलने वाली मां अहिल्याबाई की पालकी यात्रा। आज महेश्वर एक समृद्ध एवं विकासशील शहर है। पर्यटन, हस्तकला एवं हथकरघा कला के केंद्र के साथ साथ सुंदर घाट, स्वच्छ नर्मदा और प्राकृतिक सौंदर्य से परिपूर्ण महेश्वर आज एक जीवित विरासत बन चुका है।
Thank you, thank you. I hope that all transported you to Maheshwar, to the place that we love, and to the legacy that we will hear more about from Ravi now. I would invite my father, Richard Shivaji Rao Holkar, to say a few words about his long-standing friendship and relationship with Ravi and the work that they have done together in Maheshwar.
Thank you very much, Yashwant, and welcome to all of you who are interested in and devotees to Maheshwar and Ahilyabai. The history of our relationship with Ravi Gundu Rao goes back to the last century, about that for a long time ago. In any case, in the late 90s, I was spending a lot of time in Maheshwar, and had invited by chance an architect, a conservation architect. I think he was Swiss. And we were walking along the parapets, and he looked down. I'm sorry, I don't have pictures to show, but he looked down and saw serious cracks in between the horizontal place where he walked and the vertical parapets. He said, "Oh, this is, water is going to go in, and this is going to continue deteriorating." We then got a hold of Intac, as I think all of the participants here know, and pleaded for some help. And they connected me with Ravi Gundu Rao. Ravi Gundu Rao at that time was working with Associated Cement Company. Now, as you realize, cement is not something which conservation architects really like to use. We're all in favor of lime mortar and so forth. But there was an interesting trustee or member of the board who felt that, yes, ACC is doing a lot of cement construction, but why don't we also look at the heritage of the country and see how building, which after all, cement is for building, how we can rebuild things in the traditional manner. So Ravi was hired, and Ravi turned up and looked at the walls, and actually we started doing some work to repair them. One of the things I thought was quite interesting was in the horizontal walls, there were cracks, and the cracked mass of brick or stone, and they're stitched in an odd pattern so that no straight lines are visible. Anyway, that was part one. As Ravi spent more time, we also discovered under my bedroom at the foot of the ghats, there was a huge cavern, probably 3 meters by 3 meters by 2 meters in the wall, which had been carved out by the floods of the Narmada. So that was dealt with a high-tech stainless steel support. I cannot exactly remember the details, but that was an important thing. And Ravi then discovered that there were 2 places within the structure itself which were seriously in danger, and there would be a catastrophic collapse sooner or later. The front, looking towards the east, where Ahilyabai Sahib lived, the floor of the first floor was bulging out by about 18 inches, I think. Obviously, that was continuing. The structures in Maheshwar are pillar and beam wood, which is very strong, except when water gets in, and then there's deterioration. Anyway, we had to jack up the whole front of the building and solve the bulging portion. And that was only one of them. Then there was another area which was similar. And one of the nice things, Ravi has a wide range of contacts around the country, that some of which had disappeared for whatever reason. And Ravi brought in wonderful wood sculptors from Kerala, I remember, who actually replicated in old teak, which we found, the finials on these pillars which had deteriorated. It just carried on, and we were lucky to be able to call Ravi from time to time. We redid the flooring. We tried to do wattle and daub, which some of the walls were, but that wasn't too successful. So the whole process of putting Maheshwara and Ahilya Fort into shape, it took 2.5 to 3 years. And we started our first, receiving our first guests at the Ahilyabai Fort Heritage Hotel, I think in the winter of 2000, going on to 2001. Ever since that, that's 20 years ago, Ravi has given freely of his time, and whenever we need him, he has been more than willing to come. Luckily, sometimes he brings Shantala. He's also come with his parents to our Sacred River celebrations, but he is a family member, and I want to thank him publicly for the devotion and expertise which he has given to Ahilyabai Fort and to Ahilyabai Sahib's legacy. With that, Yashwant, if you carry on and direct the show.
Thank you very much, Dad. Supriya, will you
Yes.
take it forward?
Yeah. It is a great honor for me to introduce and welcome our guest speaker this evening, Ravindra Gundu Rao. He is a conservation architect who pursued his master's in conservation of historical buildings, landscapes, sites, and gardens in 1990 from University of New York. He is a technical advisor of Indian Heritage Cities Network, UNESCO, and World Monument Fund, New York for India. He has been a guest and visiting faculty in various colleges of architecture. His specialization in the area of work includes conceptualization, detailing, organizing, engineering, project management, preparation and use of traditional lime, timber restoration works in heritage, building conservation, mud architecture, conducting training programs for artisans, and many more. Numerous consultancy works are undertaken by him as the head of the Architectural Conservation Cell, ACC Limited, Mumbai, and through his private firm. He is connected to some of the restoration works in Maheshwar from 1998 till today. Today, he is here with us to share some of his restoring Maheshwar experiences. Now, I would like to request Ravi sir to share some of his experiences.
Okay, I got it.
Perfect.
Yeah. We start always with Narmade Har. Ahilyabai Sahib ki jai ho. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whichever part of the world you are in. Greetings to dear Richard, Amita, Nalini. Greetings to Ushaji and Satishji. Greetings to Yashwant, Ashish, Anu, Supriya, Akhila, Sharat, so many of my colleagues who may not be here on the line here, my friends, well-wishers, and beloved, wherever you be in. Now, I call the talk as my experiences, my story of life from Mysore to Maheshwar, which I'm very fond of always saying. Now, I was obviously, there was a providence in my coming here. There was no Richard or many other explanations, but I would put it on sheer providence that I was invited to this great place. And these experiences are now going to be shared by me through my anecdotes. Pictures are incidental, and the merits and demerits of the pictures go to Supriya. I have only pictures in my memory and in my heart. So she has put together a few slides which just work as a backdrop to the story. So my story of Mysore to Maheshwar, ladies and gentlemen. This is the quintessential Maheshwar, probably is where it's all started from. The Holkars landing from the river and taking over the little fort, which probably belonged to a sultanate, and punctured a hole in the fort wall, and they filled it up with this magnificent temple. Now I'm going to just like run through a few of the points that I noted, which will work like the contents of the talk, but they express most of what I have to say. It was an unexpected visit, thanks to Amita. Strong memories of Richard, Rashid Sahib, Vachu Point, Uncle's Chai Center in Mao, the samosas and the terrible ghat sections, Teakwood, introduction to a small river that leads to Maheshwari, the Narmada, and the Narmada itself, herself. The stunning antiquity, timelessness, and Kipling ruinousness of Ahilyabai. Rajaram, his dal, Ba the Poonam Chand, the masterclass humble man. Goats, my fellow passengers who would board with me in Dhamnaud in my bus journeys to Maheshwar. And the killer bus journeys, sometimes on something called a sleeper bus from Thane to Maheshwar, Dhamnaud, where you're largely levitating 3 feet above the seat. Oh, such sweetness. Then we have the small but significant steps, initial baby steps towards conservation. The fort base, the bastion, the cracks, the inevitable cracks, which always start the conservation. Long talks on the top of the pavilion in the Vada about conservation and the bigger picture. So here I was, who had not even seen the smaller pictures. It was a lovely time to talk about big pictures of how we should work from whole to the micro to the macro and macro to the micro and so on. Small monies, big talk, small monies, so nice. And then there was the Eskumas. Then actually getting your hands a little messy, setting up a lime process, using a stove, which probably was used in the Ahilya Masa's period to grind lime after she took over the fort and enlarged it to Maratha sensitivities and the power. There's a timber bank of buildings which are coming down like pack of cards in and around Maheshwar. And we had put together a humble 50,000 rupees of a timber bank where we could buy timber worth unbelievable amount of money, not so anymore. And we were and are sworn to authenticity and brutal honesty in conservation, inshallah. Then we got the skills from Kerala, the Jharkhand, and even the local pool. And it was sort of overseen by Poonam Chand sitting, squatting on the ground with his wrinkles of knowledge. And we look forward to seeing each other. You drop into Maheshwar, the first person I would see, maybe by sixth sense, is Poonam Chand, who would wait for me at the main gate. And there was this incredible love that existed. And with my terrible Hindi, which improved because of Maheshwar, I hope. Now, there was a dream team of Sharmilas and Nilesh's and Ramesh Boles and our Malayali carpenters and our lovely masons. And there's this lovely, lovable, dedicated Malayali friends supervisor. Those are the days. Then we had this little tug of war with Lingarchanwada, where we basically, on one rainy day, it just collapsed into its 45-degrees, and our skill of Indian great jugaad, we just pulled it back to its verticality. And there she stands after 20 years. All it needed was a lot of strength in the shoulder and a lot of ropes. And skill, of course. Then we had, things were growing in confidence. So there's the Ahilyabai, the center of gravity of Maheshwar, just short of center of gravity of universe. We'll come to that a little later. Then here is my re-education time. I got a free, well, it's not free, I was paid for it. It's a paid education in vernacular architecture, which otherwise I had studied in books and magazines and through somebody else's work. But here you are thrown in the center of the country to wattle and daub walls and dadobis and timber poles of undescribed nature in any books of architecture or engineering. and there were holes. The holes let in water, and the water ruined the timber, and the timber ruined the structure. So this was a fabulous education of decay mechanism. The more and more things we found out on the way. Then the bigger picture actually emerged. It has to be Mapu, the Bapu of conservation, as my PJ of Delhi goes. I never left touch with my PJs. Mapu called and said, I got some money. I would like you to do some work in Maheshwar. I'll leave it to you. So this was like this famous, not quite last words, but there was words. And incidentally, I owe to Mapu much earlier and much more than all this. Because back in 1989, where I was absolute nobody, with a chance of chips in hell of getting a scholarship for a British Council, Charles Fallas scholarship to study in New York, I threw in my hat in the ring because a friend of mine who was my student asked me to. And then there were maybe about 100 guys from urban design and whatnot with loads of work conducted under the armpits, standing in the queue. And me with a little bit of a hangover, got in eventually, and I walked out with a scholarship. And many years later, I found out it was Mapu, who probably himself had a hangover, decided that this is the best guy for getting there. And then, by God's grace, I've been able to repay some of his faith in me. That's another story. Now, the Mapu said, I got some money, and then I was super excited because we had the larger picture I mentioned about, and which was farmed on the terraces of Maheshwar. And then he said it is 100,000 rupees. 100,000 rupees, and I think it's somewhere around 2001 or thereabouts, which wasn't a huge amount of money even in 2001. Like about the cost of a Maruti car and a half. And I called Nalini and I told her, I'll pay you nothing. and then her entourage of boles and some other few other girls I've forgotten. The whole platoon of people arrived in Maheshwar. We did pay for the travel, I'm sure. So we went there and then did this fabulous documentation. The document exists in the Vada. Now the document is the sign of future hope. I must point out, most of the work from the document has not, fruitified. It has not seen any action so far, and it will happen when it has to happen. But good things did happen. That's the next one. Richard then came with the idea, not the idea, the inevitable thought that now we should do something about Ahilyabai, without which we will lose Ahilyabai. There were plenty of problems. Only maybe about 15% of Ahilyabai, which is Ahilya Gaddi, was regularly used. The rest of it was veritable storerooms and a zoo for mostly civet cats and bats. Both not great friends of heritage buildings. Then he was the only walking ghost who would tread all along the places where others would not dare and discover all the major issues. So then we came to idea of working towards restoring Ahilyabai. Ahilyabai was amazingly built off on the roof. I mean, as it did in much of Madhya Pradesh, probably because of the plague in the 19th century, all the country tile roofs were replaced with GI sheets. You will see it everywhere. It's possibly the military. It is probably the result of industrialization and the convenience of using what we think is an ugly material. But when I looked at that, I found a little seal which says 17 something from Germany. So I wrote a letter to Bernard Fielden, our mentor in the universities and ex-chairman of UNESCO, etc., a great friend of India, Pakistan, Turkey, and whatnot. I wrote to him, I still have the letter with me. I wrote a handwritten letter for which I received a handwritten letter which says, this is a very historic material, do not throw it. I was considering replacing it with something else. So he's the one who woke my mind to a simple, what we think is not a aesthetically pleasing material can also be very valuable. So that seal somewhere still is there. And then we now got back to technology. Thanks to my ACC R&D days, I was immersed all around me with PhDs in all sorts of sciences, and had an amazing networking guy like Nilesh, who was always a techno savvy guy, who would discover materials from nowhere. I mean, he's the type I would always say, you say, Nilesh, I need an elephant. I need a white elephant with two snoots. So you just write down elephant, snoots, troop, and by evening you'll give me 24 inquiries, including the costing and everything else and all. So he was a great sourcing man. So he came out with this wonderful materials where you could just fill the holes. So wherein none of the sheets were actually replaced. Then we gained in confidence, we were really sailing. This is like we are on the cruise mode. So we were comfortable, we had a team, and we were welcome and respected in the city. I would get Narmadehar from everyone. And then we went on to the bigger picture of converting the Ahilyabai into the picturesque ruin into a fabulous heritage hotel. I think it's the top 16 or 24 or some such thing in the world. And every now and then I hear about it. I feel very pleased. And maybe a few hundred people work there and few thousand people visit that. So it's it's something that works on its own without too many people at the top. I must confess, I had no clue about the end product that Richard had in his mind. It was this, I was just content in looking at the cracks and the bulks and the termites and the holes. And it did not ever occur to me what actually would emerge. And the structural restorations, conversion to its presentable aesthetic, all credit goes to Richard, Pam, and so on. There was then the festival time, the river festivals, with the global audience of Dieters and Marys and Pams, and it's continuous. And Maheshwar has redefined itself into its peak of its glory in this century. Now then came the restoration of the center of the universe. The little temple in the middle of the river is contested by the locals in about 100 kilometers radius as the center of the universe. And I have no problem agreeing with that. Because the various cosmos, I've heard it from various Brahmins and non-Brahmins about how the North Pole and the South Pole passes through that, and which goes right into the black hole on the top and wherever it goes on the bottom. I am very, very happy to agree with all that. But what I did find out was, why would they build a temple in the middle of the road? What's the provocation, sorry, in the river? What's the provocation in going into a massive river, which is flood prone, and even now with a couple of dams here and there? In that century, what was their provocation in building temple while you had 97 of them on the ghats here? So it could be the discovery of the center of the universe. But in any case, nevertheless, But when I stand there and I go into the temple, I'm not a very religious person. I feel very religious when I go there, and I feel something special happens there. That probably that center of gravity, whatever. Now, a little story about that. This is possibly the smallest conservation project I've ever done in my life in terms of rupees, and which took the maximum effort in any project that I've handled. Two explanations given to me by the local, my boatman friends and other priests, babas. The Shivji is very difficult to please. Then it was only a 6 feet of a shikara which had fallen down in a 1986 or 94 flood. And all you had to do was put those 23 stones above each other and put the kalash and be done with that. That's it. So when the estimate was done by Sarita, my colleague then, I laughed at it. She said 2.5 lakhs. I said, what are we going to, fleece Richard? I mean, now. So after all this, so she said, no, sir, we'll keep some money extra. It's another matter. It costed maybe 10 times more in effort. The thing was, finding the stone itself became a Herculean task. Those 23 or 14 or 18 stones took our jaan, as they say in Hindi. It took our, it took everything that we had. We went everywhere from Chiplun, which is Maharashtra, to Khargaon, some hilltop, because a Muslim who makes snake statues said, this is where you get it. And we everywhere we go there, get the stone, and the stone would come crumbling down. And then with it, my heart. And then these stones, then I brought a geologist from Mysore who's just passed away recently. May his rest is in heaven. So this gentleman with his enormous knowledge in geology told me one thing. The Narmada belt, the basalt, is 10 kilometer deep. So at certain depth, the stone is mature enough to lend itself to become a sculpture, which was beautifully reconfirmed to me in a lecture a couple of weeks ago by a friend of mine who's the dean of Shashank School of Architecture called Vibhuti Sachdeva. So she introduced the concept of Shastras of stone. I've always been a science freak, so I assume that my arrogance was supreme on the science part of it. But here is another angle she introduced me to, that there are young stones and there are mature stones and the old stones. And then do you request the stone to lend itself for your purpose, so on and so forth. So it's called some Agam Shastra, etc. I said, all these, my questions of Maheshwar in 2004 are answered today. And then lastly, now there is a regeneration. It has to happen from the young royal sitting with us here in the form of Ahilyabai temple. And he and us are going through tough times. We started beautifully. This was a very blessed project, and everything is going on a song. And we had, now we had a mature team, and we had everything under control, except some particular, I don't know how to put it, certain things beyond our control. Let's put it that way. And I'm still Yashwant. I'm complete faith that we are going through this phase so as to come back stronger. So it will happen. Now, this is all about celebrations. You have Muharrams, you have Shivratris. On a Muharram day, you have Lakshmi Bai floating her tazia. And on a Shivratri day, maybe a Yusuf serving fruits to somebody. It can happen only in Maheshwar. The Ghat, I found out, is a beautiful transition between the land and the water. The water is not over and the land has not reached. And that's where all the life happens. And metaphorically, all life in Maheshwar happens on the ghats. Ghats for the non-Indians, non-Hindi speaking would be this mere steps of stones on the river and the edge of the foothill. But I found a fabulous technical reasoning to it. While doing a little bit of research, we found the fine silty clay from the Narmada Valley blows for millions of years and gets deposited in this Nimad as little mounds. And Maheshwar is sitting a heap of mud, very fine mud of the type you can use it on your facial packs, etc. And this was discovered when we were doing the work, which will come later on. We were looking for a hard rock to rest our foundation, and there wasn't any. And we keep going down. There wasn't any. There are no rocks in this place. So if the steps were not there, there would be no Maheshwar. This is something that I was fascinated in sharing with Richard. The river is on a bend there. If you know those who've been to Maheshwar, you'll know the river is actually on a slight curve. So in the fury of its floods after rains, it just tears into the mound, which is our Maheshwar hill. So the ghat was actually conceived as an engineering tool to keep the civilization, the people together. So that strengthens my old theory that Nalini I always use in my little talks with students. Really, there is nothing like architecture and structure. A structure and architecture merges and lends itself. So we can use some names so as to, demarcate our own territory. Now, let's go now quickly to some of the more things that we did. There was this little bastion which was kind of hanging in the air. If you see these three, they were not there. Now they're there. Now it looks very easy, but it took some daring to put scaffolding on a 45-degree sloping soil and then take this, each of them weigh about 2 tons each, to take it up and erect it in its position. So hats off to the team. I remember Richard climbing the scaffolding and complimenting the boys who actually pulled it out. In itself, on a drawing, it's a very simple job. Now coming to the Richard sleep. So there was this cavity on your left was just above, exactly above which is where Richard's bedroom is, and he wasn't sleeping too well. It's very deep, very scary. And as I explained to you, there are no ghats here, so the Narmada was tearing into his dream. Then we looked for the hard rock, there wasn't any, and so on and so forth. Let's not get into the technical razzmatazz. Let's go to the Lingarchan Wada tug of war. So this little structure, you could see that there were floors here, and it was used, as the name suggests, for doing certain rituals by Brahmins. And in one monsoon, the whole thing tilted up to about some 45 to 55 degrees to the right into the courtyard. And we got some people and put it back. Now the Ahilya Gadi, or the Ahilya, that is Ahilya Wada, which is the center of the palace and the kingdom. You see the GI sheets on the left, and it was sure enough anything on the top. Well, I'm not sure, but we did get some tiles and put it back, these country tiles on the top. Now, some of these are byproducts, these brackets which hold, like I said, again, coming back to my favorite concept of structure and architecture being complementary to each other. Just imagine if this bracket were not to be there, the load of this would tilt the column and the structure will continue to suffer. Now these are the Poshak Wada, which was abandoned for easily 100 years. And when I remember, it's got a basement just below here. When we tried to enter, a billion bats flew over me and killed me. Now, this structure is made of very elementary things like what we call in Hindi a bali, which is really a pole whose economic value is close to nothing. I mean, imagine it's like in a way probably the cheapest building material ever available in the market. Now, some byproducts were this. I take some pride in it. I discovered below several layers of lime wash, and thank God it was lime wash. There was some artwork. There was Ganesh's, there was patterns. So we have left it behind. We have not even restored it, but it's still there. And it waits for an art conservator and bags of money for somebody to handle that. This is the essence of what Richard called a pole and beam. The technical word being timber frame building. Those who live in England are very familiar with that. The whole of European architecture is timber frames. So you have the whole load is transferred on these beams and columns, and intermediate walls are replaceable, and they only serve the function of creating spaces. Now, just very briefly, this is you can now even now with the white portion of the new stones we replace, and that's all. And a little bit here, a little bit here. Unfortunately, one thing we have not learned till date is to do color matching. How do you get the patina match the old? Of course, there are several theories that we can argue till the cows come home. Should we have the patina? I mean, should we match it or not match it? Let's leave that to the academics for a while. Now, the last part of the work that we have begun is Ahilyabai Mandir. We started a fairly ambitious program of which it is a fabulous precinct with Vithoba Chatri and Ahilya Sahib Chatri. Akhila and Supriya and Apurvas, many other conservation architects prepared the drawings, condition mapping, everything that Nalini taught to them very faithfully. And then, but the problem is at the 80 feet level or whatever, there is the vegetation growth which pushes the stones out by that many inches. Very messy. And then the missing artwork. The India is blessed with skills even today in timber and stone crafts. Rajasthan is booming, and it's not difficult to get timber craftsmen as well. But of course, there is always the sadness that they hate to use a hand. They're more machine prone. But I mean, we've tried to insist on, manual skills. So this is kanguras to be fitted in. So these little things, why do we need to do that? In the Archaeological Survey of India, the Marshall's law would say leave it alone. The decision we took to get into details of this nature are two or three. One, we don't want to see water going through that and creating havoc in the long run. Two, it's a living monument. Thousands and thousands of people come every day to worship and to enjoy the beauty of the temple. We don't want to present them an unfinished product if we can do it. Thirdly, here's an opportunity for Supriyas and others to learn how to do it. If we do not learn to do it, forever we will be making drawings and talking about it. Now, things like this, there is a little balcony which has no base. And even in the UNESCO charters of conservation, they say if the comprehension of the building's aesthetic is coming in the way, do interfere. And we did. Now, small things like pointing is a major enemy in our country, where the repointing destroys the architecture. A small little interference destroys the architecture, as it did in Prince of Wales Museum before we reverted that many years ago. So if the pointing, which is really a drainage for the moisture to flow out from the inside, is a nostrils of the building to allow it to move the moisture out. So they tend to cement plaster it thinking you're going to choke it off, and all it does is converse of it. So here is, now we may say we have really perfected this art of masking it, making a very fine ground lime mortar and packing it in and removing it, where the original pointing width shall not be increased by a nanomillimeter. And here is Richard monkeying around with this, and me admiring on the side. As you say, Narmade Har. Yashwant, Supriya, you can take over. I'm done.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really very interesting session. As I see in the chat box, we don't have any questions. So should we proceed it further with the vote of thanks?
Now, one second. If
Yes,
we have
sir.
a few minutes, I think we do.
Yes,
I
sir.
would like Nalini to make a 2-minute comment on the overview of it, not the talk.
It was really fascinating listening to you, Ravi, because I do remember coming way back very long ago, after that really scary, air, coming to Indore by air on a very rainy and windy day. After that, I really I didn't have much to do with this, and really we did make some, report or something like that, and it was nice to hear you talk and say all the things that have happened since then. But I'll tell you, I am now looking forward to going back to Maheshwar, okay? And that must be more than 20 years old. But the reason why I say it is now I am teaching the students of SPAB, and they have taken up Maheshwar as their studio project. So I am associated with them in one class, which is called Knowledge Systems Approach towards architecture, to give another alternative to a way of understanding architecture as a whole, which is very indigenously sort of thing. And I remember, in that in the Rajwada that we saw, I understood what is Maratha architecture. By looking at every little thing, how the wall is, how the staircase is, how the window is, part by part. Whatever I saw, it was really a great learning experience for me. And what you said, it's a vernacular. Even the Rajwada is quite local, and it's Maratha, it's really. So I want to have, most probably I will try to re-look at the whole thing and try to get my students very energized and excited about looking at Maheshwar and really learning to love it as I do, So that's what, and it was great listening to you, and I'm so happy, and I knew I was going to come for this when I heard you talking about Maheshwar.
Thank you.
Because it's a great place. It's just a fantastic little place, and I remember I was more interested in the vernacular and in the housing, the traditional housing that was there, and these large buildings, on the Ghat and the Ghats. And tell me one thing. I remember there was a problem with the Ghats because they were slipping into the water. Is that still there?
Yes.
You have said that there is no rock till the end, That is one thing you mentioned. And that is a bit of a problem. And the reason why in India we always did these Ghats is because we tried to take the line of repose off the ground. And that is sound engineering. And the moment you get the repose through these Ghats, through the water, you've done it. It's just you made it very romantic and extremely poetic, the way you talked about the water and the, and the ghats and the activities. But I think it's a very logical sound engineering and very innovative and easy way to do. But there was a problem in this ghat. It's not there in most of the other ghats I've seen. So, that's, I remember that. So has that been somehow, sorted out? Something has to be done there, and it's very important, because otherwise this will keep happening every year. So it's a very highly technical kind of project, as a problem, and it has to be
right.
not, and I think even that, let me think, think about how to do that, and find somebody for that.
Can I inject, Nalini?
Yeah.
2 years
Yes.
ago, this matter has been critical for a long time, as you notice.
Yes.
One of the ghats of the sort of projections fell into the river
Yes.
before the time we were there. But nonetheless, I think 2 years ago, there was a very serious project in which cement slurry, on the riverside when the water was extremely low, and then some of the stones on the horizontal surface of the ghats were removed, and cement slurry was injected there. That is the work that has been done a couple of years ago, and I've not seen any further deterioration or outward leaning of the existing ghats.
Good. I think now there is a solution for that. It's there. It needs a base has to be more strong, for that. And well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I have my friend. When I was working those days, we made acquaintance with this marvelous friend of ours called Shruti Mahajan, who is with us today. Shruti was an intern. She's a MS University fine arts artist. She's a fine artist as well. And then she also did a textiles master's from NID Ahmedabad. And she was doing her internship in the Reva Society. And Shruti and I were kind of living in 2 rooms across in Haldi or Badam or all those things. So we would interact. And then recently, Richard, Shruti and I, actually more Shruti than I, so put together an art. She'll talk about it in like 3 sentences. We put a show of sort, an art and architecture conversations. I think the conversation part of it was my input. Shruti, 3 sentences.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm really happy to meet Mr. Holkar, Maheshwar, Rao, Ravi, and everyone. Really, it's a delight, and for me, very nostalgic, because I also lived in that Vada for nearly 8 to 9 months as a young student. And well, for me, while I was a textiles design student, I was also a painter, and I really I was documenting everybody, ghats and the choklas. So now today, when I'm invited for a show in Delhi, which is about art and architecture, I think to speak to Ravi was my very natural, inclination. And I thought that, because we've had such lovely conversations around conservation also, and the thing of, bringing in 2 threads of how Reva Society also was built by, of conserving the textiles, or bringing back looms in the space. I think I thought this could be a very natural thing to weave and to integrate drawings for this project, which is called Continuities of Construction. So, you all are most welcome for the show, which will be in Delhi next month. Hopefully, the dates are going to be out, and I think it's a response of an artist to the space that Ravi had conserved, and looking at the aesthetics of architecture, the beam and pillar structure, and to bring out similarities of how pillar is an important structure of also a loom, So I think those are my threads of looking at steps which bring Ahilya Fort to the river. So, the idea of up and down, which is also a very integral language of weaving, it goes up and down simultaneously. So I think those are some of the threads that I'm bringing in together through drawings and writings and an installation with textiles. So I think I'm really, really grateful for this talk that came as a serendipity for me, you know. While I'm totally engaged, my studio is full of images from Maheshwar. So thank you so much.
I want you to, Shruti, I would like you to share your sketchbook with the Holkars. It's a treasure house, Richard and Yashwant. She has a lovely sketchbook which she has immortalized the Raja Ramjis and Lakshman Dadas. I mean, you have plenty of photographs, but none of them do 10% justice as her sketches do. Wahid and the man who coughs all night, the watchman who shouts at 3 o'clock, Narmadayas. So they're all there, and it's a treasure house, and you must find some method of publishing it. And I think it will be a fabulous thing for anybody, and especially those who know, Maheshwar. Lastly, can I request Jean Leonard, our friend, who is a big Indophile, who loves India, who's been in Maheshwar, to just say a few things that you wish, if you wish.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to this morning because I normally go to India like every second year, and I haven't been able to come for a long time, and I was getting a bit sort of homesick in a way because part of my heart is actually in Mysore, and Abby's also a family member, as Richard said Abby was a family member of his, but we have a common family member, that's Ravi, Shantala and Aditya. So it's all shared love, and I had a lovely time in Maheshwar. Actually really happy to see that the whole project is alive, and that Yeshwant is now really interested in the project, is going to lead it with Richard, is going to go on. So I wonder what the problem was there. You said there was something, there was a problem, but I hope it will be resolved. And I think we'll go on, and I'll be fortunate enough to come back with my sister Sophie and Manu and Alfred Olivier, our dear beloved friends, so we can enjoy some more marvelous time with you in Maheshwar.
Thank you. There's some questions here. One from
Vishal Katkar.
Can you read that question for me, please?
Sure, sir. What kind of geological features that influenced the regional architecture?
Oh, nice question. Nice question. It's 50 degrees here. This is one of the hottest places in the subcontinent. So along with Jaisalmer and some place in Tirupati, every year Maheshwar touches 50 degrees Celsius, and that's one factor. And I already said it's an aerial deposition of clay, fine silt from the Narmada Valley. So it's a very fine, dusty thing, which I did soil testing, and we found out by the US technique, it's called buckpeat. That's the technical word in the US soil classification. In the Indian soil classification is called silty clay, which is a self-binder. That's very interesting. That's Poonam Chand introduced to me on the day 1 or 2. You take a heap of soil from wherever you're standing, add a little water and shape it, and it becomes a rock. And here we are bringing cement from Katni, Kaimur and Delhi, and where we're not. So it was a lesson that the local soil is a self-binder. So you do not need anything to build here, and the bullies or the local shrubs grown somewhere around. And the teak wood is CP teak is just across in the hills there. So the geography, it has a very bare and a harsh climate except the river. So the people have adopted themselves to the bare minimum materials available there. There's another question from what kind of a foundation the Ahilya temple has. I would assume they are wide stone foundations so as the whole structure stands symmetrically and sits like a table. And the last one, it says there is a process. What are the bylaws? What are the kinds of policies and bylaws were considered? We did not consider anyone. Thank you so much.
And next question is from Smritika, but she has not mentioned the question. Smritika?
Very philosophical question.
Hi. So my question was about the foundation only. It's there at the bottom.
Yeah, I read that. So that's what, because this is not only here. In everywhere, when you have a compression structures in India, where you don't have a hard rock foundation, so what you do is you make the wall very thick, wide. It can be as wide as 3 or 4 or 5 meters, and the whole of the basement is like a big table. In engineering term, it can be equated to what's called a raft foundation. So the whole of the structure is allowed to sink in uniformly and no further. So if there is no change in the environment, such structures should last for eternity. The problem is when the river causes a havoc. Hope I answered the question.
Priya, I believe there's one more question which we missed, which was from Renuka ji. What is the role of community and heritage of Maheshwar?
That maybe, Yashwant, you can attempt that.
I don't think there's a simple answer there. There are many roles of many different communities in the heritage of Maheshwar. Some are highly productive roles and some are not so productive roles, let's put it that way. But the most important part of, I think, the role of the community has been one of sensitization, which is an ongoing process where many of the people who have been part of keeping Maheshwar beautiful and keeping Maheshwar alive have been heavily involved in sitting with people, sitting with various stakeholders, and helping them understand why a particular structure in its original state is beautiful, why it's important, why it should matter to the community as a whole. I must say that is every day a struggle. It continues to be a struggle, but it is a struggle worth having. So I would say, we're very, very fortunate to have had decades of help and support by the leading people you see here today in working with the local community to achieve that level of understanding that we have today. I don't know, Ravi, if you have.
Yeah, I just want to add, it would be incomplete without mentioning the not successful side of our experience. I must confess, with utmost honesty, our work has not elicited more than curiosity in the community. I mean, I was really hoping that since the Maharaja has set up the examples, and the people would follow, and they did. There you can see many of the little, the ripples of the image of the success of Ahilyabai in and around. And when nobody is happier, more pleased than I am to see the economic prosperity of Maheshwar. And from the days I am coming from 97 till now, it's a very rich place. Those days it was a very humble place. It's a very rich place now. But I'm talking about specifically about the virtues of traditional materials, such as just what I mentioned about the mati, the local soil, which is a free binder. If you can sell it actually in France for some 25 euros per a small bag of maybe 3 kgs. And just name it differently. For example, a brick dust in Germany is called Supra something, and it's priced enormously. So the point is, I don't know why I've searched this answer all my life. It has only excited the literate, not literate, not the right word, the initiated and the scholars, but the local people have never really accepted, to my mind, they have not accepted the virtues of revisiting traditional materials like mud, lime, stone. And they have strong and affinity towards a terrible product called cement and concrete in this context. So this is something that I have never figured out. Maybe this is something that can be explained only academically. But till such time, I find people actually coming forward and say, yeah, this is a better material, so let's use it. I feel we have failed from that point of view.
Ravi, I think you're going to from ACC to Associated Lime Mortar, ALMC. We can bag it and sell it in France. Any other questions, Supriya?
Yes, sir. From Sharon.
Yes, Sharon, please, Sharon. Sharon is an old and a very dear friend of mine, calling from Calcutta. He's a man of many, many virtues. Guitarist, drummer, architect, pianist, and whatnot. Sharon, please come in. Sharan Lalji. No, he's not.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself all this while. Yeah, so I just wanted to add my 2 bits about the foundation topic, because there's a similarity that we have experienced over here, seen over here in the very well-known Victoria Memorial Building, which is a massive structure. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you, Sharon. Go on.
Yeah, so it's what Ravi said about, making the walls as wide as possible. And so it's a very similar situation over here when the Victoria Memorial was being constructed. It is basically sitting on a bed of, it's a mixture of mud and water. So there is nothing to support the structure. And so William Esch, the famous guy who took over the building from Emerson and completed it for him, he devised this system of foundation where basically the walls were very wide and very heavy. And it was what is come to be known as a duck's foot foundation. So you can imagine a duck's feet with the webbing. And the way he went about building this building was he built one portion of the building on one side, and then he went to the other side and he built. So it was like, a balancing act. And the whole thing came up by building in different portions of the site of the building at different times, so that at no one point any part of the building was going to subside. And it's like and that's how the building was completed. It's truly an amazing piece of engineering. And it is almost like the building with its massive weight is floating on mud and water. That's all.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
One happy news, Ravi, that I'd like to share on your subject of lime mortar being important or not, is that thanks to your let's call it slight suggestions along the years, the Principal Secretary of archaeology in the state of Madhya Pradesh has now made it mandatory that any government project that are restoring old structures must use traditional materials. So there is some hope, there is some light at the end of the tunnel that they're not going to slap, tons of cement on top of old lime mortar buildings. So hopefully that will, trickle down, trickle up, trickle around to the common man as well.
Actually, to answer my own question, I feel one of the strong reasons is ready availability. It's just a simple fact, like if cement, you can pick it up on a phone call. It's so easy. It's not that the people are dumb. It's not that people don't know how, they have no ancestral memory or any of it. It's just that you don't want to create a dinosaur. It's easier to pick up a dog than to rear and find the dinosaur and that kind of a thing. So you can call somebody and you'll deliver a dog, whatever size and pedigree. But you want some animal that simply doesn't exist around you. Now you got a problem. Therefore, I think one of the main problems is processing of the lime. To get the lime or a mud, one thing. Then the processing, you've gone through that, Richard has gone through that, Yashwant has gone through that. It's hard work. Today, carpenters don't like to work on anything other than plywood. You give them wood, he'll run away because it's too much work. So either you pay them more, for the same guy to work on wood, you have to pay more, because if he's going to get the same money for using cement and lime, I would choose cement. So it could be that. Anyway, so maybe we could, if there are no questions, if you wish to conclude, you're welcome. Unless somebody else has something to talk about.
I think in interest of everybody's time, then we'll move on to the vote of thanks.
Thank you.
Supriya?
Yes, sir. So finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone on behalf of the Holkar Cultural Center team. First of all, I would like to thank our guest lecturer, Ravi sir, who shared his precious knowledge and experience with all of us. Today's lecture was full of knowledge and interesting things, and it gave some deep insights into the topic and also revealed some interesting facts. I would also like to thank Yashwant Holkar and Richard Holkar, without whose presence this lecture was not possible. And lastly, I would like to thank all the participants for taking out time from their busy schedule and attending this lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supriya.
Thank you very much, Supriya. We will have a recording of this lecture available on YouTube, and which will be circulated as well. But thank you all very much, and excellently organized, Supriya. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great opportunity to meet all my friends. Thank you all. Thank you so much. God bless.
Narmade Har.
Narmade Har.
Thank you.